Hi, chat. How are you guys doing? Hope everybody's doing okay. It's Monday night, or well, it's not Monday night. Well, ugh. I mean, it'll be nice if I could time travel to Monday night, but no, it is not Monday night. It is Sunday night. And something that came up at the end of the week last week is I wouldn't call it the peculiar case, or I mean, it's really a shitty case when you think about it at the end of the day. It's the country of Mexico. And what's this? Somebody just texted me. And basically, it's the country of Mexico. Yes, that Mexico. Yes, the wall should be 10 feet taller in Mexico. Yes, Mexico. They are suing Smith & Wesson. They were suing some other companies, but primarily Smith & Wesson. Why? Well, because Smith & Wesson's big. The argument is that because Mexico, I mean, let's be real, Mexico, it's not nice down there. It's not a nice place. There's a lot of rapists and murderers and drug dealers and all kinds of nasty crap going on down south of the border. You know, that's if you guys have ever seen Sicario, yes, that is well, I mean, it's not a joke. You know, Sicario is a very good example of things. And yes, Mexico's national pastime now, you'd think at this point, is severing heads with cutting people's heads off with chainsaws. So this is something that's been going on for a while. And in Mexico, they blame this on guns coming in from America. Now, it's funny because when you watch videos of like cartel shootouts and things like that, we see something interesting. We see a very, very, very interesting issue of these guys are using fully automatic weapons and weapons that we don't normally have access to as U.S. citizens, because the idea is they come into gun stores and gun shows and buy the guns and they take them south. Except, you know, you see things like full auto Heckler and Koch rifles from Germany. Other things that, Mexican government has a military contract with H&K. Or you see like full auto M4s, M16s, and well, there's a bit of an issue there too, because we provide defense assistance and military assistance to Mexico. We do. And well, how many of those things are really coming from there? Well, and either way, this is something that's been heating up for a very, very long time. And it's to the point where it's actually Mexico blames the United States so badly, so badly, that we end up, like if you guys have ever seen the sign before, they've this is on the Mexican border facing the United States. And there's one of these in Juarez where this is actually made out of guns. Like they took guns and cut them and made them in the shape of, no more weapons. And you're like, looks like, when I've seen the sign before, and it's always like the little part off that fell off and their spacing's not right. Which I guess I know. I understand English ain't their first language. They're trying though. So yes, that is how bad things are boiling over. We've had multiple scandals in the U.S. government, like Operation Wide Receiver was one of them. That was the predecessor to Fast and Furious. Then Fast and Furious is where the ATF was. Well, we were supposed to put tracking beacons in guns, and then we were going to track them, but oops, we messed up. And then those guns were used to murder a Border Patrol agent. And nobody went to prison for that. The ATF literally armed a cartel group, and nobody was held accountable. So isn't it kind of funny? It's kind of funny that the Mexicans aren't trying to sue the United States government for a lot of these issues. But what do I know? What do I know? I'm just a simple lawyer in Ohio. So, Amateur Iconoclast is not sharking if you see an apartments built by Mexicans, yeah. Yes. Porcelain Thunder's right. There's supposed to be a comma, so it's actually what they meant to say was no. Oh, I gotta make it a little thicker here. No, comma, more weapons. Yay! We want more weapons, which I think is a very fair interpretation of it. So, and Fast and Furious isn't even a secret, yes, but at the time it was when they did it. So that is kind of where we are. Yes, it's funny because Mexico then later got sued by Heckler & Koch because they made their own bootleg G36. Yes. Yes. So anyway, as these things have been going, we are now to the point where Mexico sued in federal court. It ended up going to the First Circuit. And now the Supreme Court has granted certiorari. So what we're going to do is we will go through the First Circuit's opinion and then the issues surrounding certiorari. And we're going to be able to do this tonight pretty quick. So we're going to get to that. And guys, I apologize if you are new. My name is Sean, also known as Potentially Criminal. I am an attorney in the Cleveland, Ohio area. Do a lot of defense-related things. Love guns. So, we're going to talk about some guns tonight because this is an interesting court case where a nation is suing a gun company because they're blaming the gun company for putting all the violence out there on the streets. And is it really Smith & Wesson's fault or is it Mexico's fault? I mean, really, when you think about it, like, is it really, they should have known these guns were going to go down there. Yes, bad people use guns. I mean, that's at the end of the day. Like what? Like at that point, what do you expect them to do? I mean, it's not. I think you run into some issues about how fair, how reasonable things are, because right now Mexico wants to sue Smith & Wesson and hold them up on this. I mean, it's yes. Anyways, it was part of a $10 billion lawsuit that was filed. And hold on here. Where did this go? Hold on here. So ultimately, and if you guys, actually, before we get too far, we need to go back to 2005. In 2005, a law was passed, and this has actually been a very beneficial law. It's been very helpful. It's one of the few things I think Congress did that was really good. And it's the PLCAA, the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Acts. Okay, it's a federal law, and it generally prevents liability for firearm manufacturers if a third-party criminal goes out and uses their guns. This law was very ahead of its time, and it did a very good job because it insulates gun companies. And if you start making AR-15s and some guy decides to go play duck hunt in your school somewhere, well, it's not your fault. You can't be held liable for that. Now, we have seen other cases, though, since then of like Daniel Defense getting sued and other places getting sued, other companies getting sued under theories. And courts have, well, especially in Connecticut, it doesn't count. They've been throwing out and dismissing these. The defense is being raised and courts have ignored it, which that's just kind of lawfare at its finest. But typically, when you sue in federal court, you're done. You can't sue a gun company for this. Well, Mexico sued. Mexico sued in federal court in Boston, and the federal judge agreed, yeah, the PLCAA said, sorry, can't do it. The First Circuit disagreed. And the issue is, one, that Smith & Wesson is being accused of things by someone else outside of the United States, so it's not guns getting to Mexico wouldn't be lawful. And the argument for Mexico is that they were aiding and abetting gun smuggling and encouraging it and not caring about it. Well, aiding and abetting the smuggling of firearms is not, lawful. So what do you do at that point? Well, the First Circuit said that doesn't count. Now, is that really the way this should have gone? No, but it is what it is right now. That's the problem here. That is the problem here. And ultimately, they reversed and they said, actually, Mexico can sue. Now, what happened? Well, Smith & Wesson came back and they want to... They're like, no. We don't want to deal with this. This is not fair. So this started out as Smith & Wesson filing their petition for certiorari. And they filed. Mexico responded. And this happened back in April. And it's been going on for a little while now. So multiple people sent in amicus curiae. A bunch of them. Amici, I think you might want to say. From all over the place. Separate states, their attorney general sent stuff in. Firearms Policy Coalition. All kinds of different legal non-for-profit groups to support Second Amendment. But you also have a bunch of other groups that were involved. Like it's interesting, though. You didn't see things like at this point there was no Giffords or Everytown USA or any sort of the gun control groups that got involved. And for this, guys, I want to show you this is the actual case here. It's Smith & Wesson Brands Incorporated et al. Versus petitioners and Estados Unidos Mexicanos, as we know it, Mexico. It's really not like we're churching it up here a little bit. But it's interesting. You don't see, petition of certiorari filed by Smith & Wesson, but you see the groups that were involved. The Atlantic Legal Foundation, the Landmark Legal Foundation, the state of Montana, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Constitutional Rights Union, the NRA, the Firearms Policy Coalition, Matt LaRosierre's favorite organization, the Buckeye Institute, the Mountain States Legal Foundation, to keep and bear arms filed, different states, the National Association for Gun Rights. What don't you see? Anytown USA, Bloomberg, you don't see anything there, which is very interesting. It's very interesting. We don't see any of that stuff. We don't see anything knocked around by these other organizations, which I thought was a little surprising that we never heard from them. It is, it doesn't, you'd think there would be a lot there, but there's not. Will Mexico show up in court? Yes. Alyssa, it was Montana and I think multiple other states signed on to that brief. And I think there's actually a list of them. Hold on here. We'll go back to that Montana one since you guys are wondering, like, the state of Montana, the main document here. So it's a bunch of people here. Additional signatories are listed at the signature page. Okay, so we'll get down to the signature page here. And yeah, it's additional signatories besides Alabama. Alabama, Alaska. Well, it's funny, Arizona, like Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi. I do think it's funny. Theodore Rakita, the Attorney General of Indiana. Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oklahoma. Ohio did not, and I'm a little disappointed they didn't. South Dakota, I love how for Tennessee he's the attorney general and reporter. It's like, so does that mean we have to? Oh, damn it! It didn't switch over. Didn't switch over. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on. So here are all the organizations that signed on. I do think it's funny for Tennessee. His attorney general is also a reporter. Does that mean we have to hate him more? Does that mean we have to hate him anymore now? I don't know if we can. I'm surprised by the non-signatories. I am too. I am very disappointed Ohio's not on there, but hey, you know what? I can't really do anything about it. But we have all these states. Now, it's interesting. You notice the president of the Arizona Senate and the speaker of the Arizona House. That's because the Arizona Attorney General is a raving lunatic Democrat. She is not going to sign this and agree to it. So that's why we are where we are. But it's quite a few states. It's not just there. I know some of you guys are saying, well, was it just state of Montana? No, other states did as well. So there were petitions filed for Amicus or for cert. And Mexico filed a cert, and so did Smith and Wesson. And where the heck? I lost Mexico's. I just lost it. I had it open and I closed it. Oh, there we go. All right, there we go. Sorry. Prior to that, though, there were these letters that were filed, letters of briefing and information. And it is interesting because it shows you who's involved in this when it comes to lawfare terms. So representing Smith and Wesson is Jones Day. And guys, if you don't know Jones Day is the big time. They are the swingingest of the swinging dicks. Very, very. It's they got the good. They got, you know. They ain't go hire me. They ain't go hire some guy working out of a strip mall. They went and hired some good shit. They went and hired some good stuff. They went and hired the good things. Why is this not working? Hold on here. Why is it not as poignant? But that's okay. We'll deal with it. This was sent August 8th, and this is just a notice that they were saying, and it shows you who all is actually being sued. So Sturm Ruger and Company, also known as Ruger, Barrett Firearms, Glock, and Colt's Manufacturing Company, LLC. So Colt, the proud makers of the M4 carbine, and for a very long time, the exclusive manufacturer of the M4 carbine. Century Firearms International, Beretta USA. These guys were granted motions to dismiss. And the dismiss was granted for lack of personal jurisdiction. So there's only two people left, Smith & Wesson and Interstate Arms. Basically, Mexico went after the entire gun industry, and they failed. So I think that just shows you who's all involved there and what's going on there. They point out, and this is a letter to the court, just basically arguing that Mexico's pursuing joint and several liability to the tune of billions of dollars. They want injunctive relief against Smith & Wesson. And it's years of litigation and the specter of business-crushing liability. And the court's review is warranted now because Congress made clear in the PLCAA this sort of lawfare against law-abiding members of the firearms industry has no business in American courts. And I think that's a very fair statement. It should not be here. It should not be here. But sadly, it is. Sadly, it is. So this is their way of saying, Judge, They're asking the court, let us be heard. We need to do this now, or we're screwed. Now, with that all said, guys, we need to actually get into these things. And why is... All right. So what do we have first? We have the petition for certiorari. And the certiorari is the right to be heard. You guys may have heard before called granting cert. And that's what this is. Smith & Wesson is asking to be heard. And if you heard it stated before, it is very hard to get certiorari. It's very hard to get. Court is not always inclined to grant it. Now we can get Mexico to pay for the wall. Yes. Well. Oh. Golden Monk who says, one cert, please. If it was only that easy. If it was only that easy, go, yes, sir. May I please have a cert petition? Please. Just one heckin' cert. Or, hold on here. Gotta do it with my hair. Gotta get it right. I can't get it to go back. I say, when I got my hair cut yesterday, she put product in my hair and it went straight back. I looked like freaking Captain Ramius. Give me one cert, Vasily. One cert only. Anyways, we're moving on. This is their cert petition. This is what they're asking for. They're asking to be heard. So once again, it is through Jones Day. If you guys can't read that, let me know. I'm trying not to make it too bright. Stabber, we're going to cover the Illinois assault weapons ban tomorrow. No, probably on Tuesday. Because that is getting interesting. So the questions presented, and this is important because it's them framing the questions that they want the Supreme Court to address, and they want them to address it in this manner. So the Mexican government has sued leading members of the firearms industry, seeking to hold them liable for harms inflicted by Mexican drug cartels. According to Mexico, America's firearms companies have engaged in a series of business practices for decades, from selling semi-automatic rifles to making magazines that hold over 10 rounds. Isn't that interesting? It's not that, oh no, they're killing us. It's, wow, they're making more than 10-round magazines. That's the problem? That's your issue? Oh my God, it sounds like you're doing somebody's bidding here. I'm just thinking. Huh. It's almost like this isn't entirely theirs. So I'm just saying it's a little weird for me. It's a little weird for me. I'm just saying, chat. I'm just saying. They go on to state that, and this is also one of the issues, guys. You're like, why does the Supreme Court make you waste all the space? Because they want to. It's their filing rules. They failed to impose various sales restrictions and have created a supply of firearms later smuggled across the border and ultimately used by the cartels to commit crimes. Mexico asked for billions plus extensive relief imposing new gun control measures in the U.S. The district court dismissed the case under the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, the PLCAA, which generally bars suits from criminals misusing their products. But the First Circuit reversed, saying that it does not bar the suit because Mexico stated a claim the defendant's business practices have aided and abetted firearms trafficking, proximately harming the Mexican government. Yes. So remember, as we said, well, that's not lawful anymore. There's no lawful commerce if you're involved in gun running. Now, do I agree with that? No, but we're talking about why did the court rule that way? Well, also remember, it's the First Circuit. And if you guys don't understand where the First Circuit is, well, I mean, obviously it is where Boston is because they started this in Boston. But, here is the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And look where it's at, chat. The First Circuit Court of Appeals. Maine, New Hampshire, which really isn't the big deal there. But Maine kind of is. But Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Oh, wow. to heavily restrictive states. Although surprisingly, Rhode Island is not as restrictive as like Connecticut or Massachusetts. Massachusetts, a state where you need a separate license to possess ammunition than a separate license to possess a gun. Yep. Mm-hmm. So something to think about. Just something to think about. A little quinky-dink there. So the questions presented are whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States is the proximate cause of alleged injuries to the Mexican government stemming from violence committed by the cartels. Some of you might say, well, wait, that's not very constitutionally written or laden. It doesn't have to be. This is a federal court case situated in federal law, so Supreme Court has jurisdiction to hear it. And then so it's interpretations. It's an interpretation issue. Whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States amounts to aiding and abetting illegal firearms trafficking because firearms companies allegedly know some of their products are unlawfully trafficked. And that's the argument Mexico made. Smith & Wesson knew it was happening. Well, how the fuck were they going to stop it? That's always been my thought on this argument. So I talk about the parties. Because the parties where everybody that was involved initially, it's Smith & Wesson, Barrett, Beretta, Glock, Sturmruger, the Interstate Arms, Century International, Colt, and then we're the defendants below. You know, the Estados Unidos Mexicanos. Is that how you say it? Estados Unidos Mexicanos. Did I say it right? I don't know. My Espanol's good. Now, there's also a corporate closure statement. We don't have to get through that. We're just going to skip ahead here. We don't need to worry about those. There are related proceedings down in the District Court of Massachusetts, then in the First Circuit. So they got through the question presented. The parties, a corporate disclosure statement. Apparently, Clyde and Laney just had a fight over something. More likely, Clyde. So we are going to go, and we're going to move on here because we need to get to what actually has happened here and what the arguments are. Because you can see there are a lot of arguments here. Reasons for granting the petition. And those are the big things here. And you notice a guy said page 14, but these are, that's different count. These are pages that don't count in your thing. That's actually a special thing for appeals. When you read them, you'll see that routinely. So anyways, the reasons for granting this. And this is where I think they make great arguments. Because we already know now that the Court of Appeals said it's your fault. You should have known. You know, Mexico's right. You should have known better. Clyde's being railroaded. Yes. I don't know. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. He's a good boy. So I don't know if I can say that he's not. So the reason for granting this, it creates a split and conflicts with this court's precedent. And that's always a great way to get a higher court to take your case. Hey, these guys are telling you no when you've already said yes, or the other way around. There is little new about Mexico's suit. And that's why we point out with the 10-round magazine thing. That's the interesting part. 10-round magazines, chat. Because in Mexico, you can't own guns with 10-round magazines. That's all illegal. There's only one legal gun store in Mexico, and it's in Mexico City. And guess who runs the gun store? The Mexican Army. So this idea of, oh, well, the 10-round mags is a critical issue. You can't buy 10-round magazines in Mexico. So it's funny they bring this up. But it's just very funny. Yes, some of the domestic governments had tried using the Americans' firearms industry, raising the same sorts of allegations against many of the same defendants. Yes. And courts have roundly rejected those arguments, those gambits as too attenuated and too remote to satisfy long-established principles of proximate cause. Yes, and proximate cause is a very simple standard. But what you have here at this point is, and like I said, guys, this is all these companies, all these organizations, all these states have tried to sue, and every time they get felted. And that's the problem here. It's not a monopoly issue. He says what we have here is a racket, pretty much. Yes, but that's the thing. And this is actually a common issue in Central America and in Southern America, South America and Central America. You can own calibered weapons, but they have to be in non-military calibers. So instead of 9mm or 45, you'll own 38 Super, which is actually a very potent and powerful handgun cartridge. But you can only own non-current military caliber weapons. This is actually a case in a lot of European countries during the Cold War because there were so many stockpiles of World War II weapons floating around that has since kind of dried up. So they've loosened restrictions somewhat, but that is why, for example, as I mentioned before, in Italy, where Alec Baldwin's revolver came from Pieta. In Italy, they love cowboy guns, partially because they like the spaghetti westerns, but it's also a type of firearm you can get access to in a lot of European countries. Single action revolvers, lever action guns, they're generally not as big a problem to get, comparatively speaking. If you are able to get semi-automatic weapons, those are tough. A lever action gun is pretty easy to get. So there's a lot of reasons behind that. Yes, ironically, gun rights are enshrined in their constitution. Yes. And yes, it's very popular in Mexico because they can't get a hold of stuff. That's a legal caliber. Now, the fate of Mexico's suit should follow. It is even more attenuated and more remote. And I agree, it's very attenuated. There is no directly linkable cause. That the actions have to relate closely to the injury. When you're trying to establish proximate cause, chat, you're establishing like you ran a red light and hit somebody and you injured them. Okay, you are the proximate cause for the injuries. But Mexico is saying Smith & Wesson, you made a gun, was then sold to a distributor, which then was sold to a gun store, which was then bought by somebody. And then at some point, that gun ended up in Mexico. It could have been one more step or 100 more steps. Well, at what point is that Smith & Wesson's fault? And the idea is these are not closely related at all. And this chain of causation spans international borders and involves foreign criminals and as Kamal Harris likes to talk about, transnational criminal entities. Doing foreign crimes on foreign soil, causing injury to a foreign government. Like how the fuck does anybody, how is any of that foreseeable? If, what a gangbanger might do with a gun's not foreseeable, knowing what the Mexican cartels will do is certainly not. No, God, I was wondering why it's getting cold. I had the window open still. That's not going to be foreseeable in any remote way. Now, they point out the First Circuit's position is a total outlier. Mexico's complaint harbors a law school exam's worth of proximate cause infirmities. And by this, they're saying this is so ridiculous, you'd put this in a law school exam to let kids pick it apart. And the First Circuit adopted and excused all this by adopting a long discredited view that requires only foreseeability, no matter how attenuated the causal chain may be. So the idea is, and this is how Mexico or the First Circuit got around everything. Well, they said it was foreseeable. You knew there was a issue in Mexico. There was violence and guns were being trafficked. And the cartels were grabbing up as many guns as they could and smuggling them south. And they have smuggled a lot of guns out of America into the South. Stolen guns, or they'll buy guns. That actually does happen. So the idea is, well, you could have foreseen that, and you should have known that. And because you could have foreseen it, all those causal links in the chain, they may have gone like all over the place. Nope, that's a straight line. You knew about it, therefore you're liable. That's not how that should be. And there's no way in hell you would know about that. Should we abolish the First Circuit? Yeah. No. No, no. No, and there won't be a Franks hearing. But yes, this conflicts with multiple circuits and multiple state Supreme Courts. The PLCAA's explicit and proximate cause requirement incorporates traditional understandings of proximate cause, meaning that we have commonly held. It's got to be closely related to the harm. And if you can't draw a close causal connection, then it's not a proximate cause. Now, I will say there are tons of cases, and the cases happen all the time in torts, and this is a tort action. It's a civil action where you argue over what exactly is proximate cause. And did these actions cause the harm? Was it a foreseeable harm? Is this even remotely related? That's not an uncommon argument to have. So having it here is not really that. Don't be confused by that. That's something that actually makes sense to have here. And it also getting back to this, they say it also recognized that other courts, including the Third Circuit, Connecticut Supreme Court, have applied traditional proximate clause doctrine to reject the exact same type of suit brought by other government entities. But the First Circuit went ahead anyway, allowing the suit to proceed because it did not find the earlier decisions persuasive. Now, they talk about what the Third Circuit did in the 1990s, and this is, for reading this before, guys, this is a good kind of breakdown of the history of these cases, so you get why I said the whole 10-round thing just reeks of bullshit. This is just one more. This is everybody thinking outside the box. The city of Philadelphia sued a group of firearms manufacturers, many of whom were also defendants there, and they were, seeking to hold them liable for local criminal violence. They said, according to the complaint, the defendants had engaged in marketing and distribution practices that they knew of led to downstream criminal activity. They noted that they were allowing customers to purchase multiple firearms. They failed to curb straw purchases. And they sold to all licensed dealers. Now, notice that. They're like, well, we want you to cut down on straw purchases. And that you're selling to everybody who's got a license. Well, don't we want people to have licenses? Why would we not want people to have a license? I mean, don't you want to use FFLs? Well, wait, we know they don't because, once again, the domestic gun control groups, this is all bleeding over into you can see it bleeding through. They failed to monitor and supervise dealers. That's the government's job. And use marketing schemes that appeal to criminals. And writing for a unanimous panel that included then Judge Alito. Yes, that Judge Alito. And Judge Ambrose and Judge Greenberg. They explain the essence of proximate cause is a direct relation between the injury asserted and the injurious conduct alleged. So the city failed for 4 reasons. The city's long and tortuous chain of causation was clearly too attenuated. And as I said, firearms went from the manufacturers to wholesalers to distributors to retailers to the straw buyers to criminals. Well, and then you could also throw in ones that get stolen. At some point, where the fuck's the liability chain end? They said second, the city's injuries were entirely derivative as they were the byproducts of direct injuries suffered by the citizens. Yes. And they said third, the city's flawed causal chain was punctuated by multiple independent factors, in particular, criminal behavior. Yeah, because these guys decide to do it, it's not your fault. They said fourth, apportioning damages would be unworkable because the city's injuries were caused by multiple distinct causes and actors. Yeah, each time this happened, it's a separate distinct action, but a separate distinct person. So how much harm did this guy cause versus this guy versus this guy versus this guy versus this guy? How many? Can you do it? The Connecticut Supreme Court had already done something similar, and there was a similar case brought against many of the same defendants, and Smith and Wesson would be one of them. They were headquartered in Massachusetts, and Colt was headquartered in New Haven, Connecticut. And some of you might say, why is that? Well, back during the Industrial Revolution, that was where you were headquartered, was on the East Coast. Well, the allegations are the firearms are too easy to alter. And look at the case. It's from 2001. They're making the allegation the firearms are easy to alter. It's almost like they're going after Glock again, like Chicago. They knowingly sold guns in a manner that foreseeably led to guns flowing into an illegal market. They failed to implement sufficient controls over their methods. And they lost for many of the same reasons. And it was rejected for lack of proximate cause. And they said this type of claim is too indirect, remote, and derivative. Even the Illinois Supreme Court. Illinois. 20 years ago, chat. Yes. Real quick, Keopathic, yes, also brings up they can throw in cops selling training and evidence guns, which does happen, as well as guns that disappear from Camp Pendleton. And Maddie's saying, how the hell do you get weapons off a military base? They won't let you go to bed if you can't account for every casing on a range. That's because the military has lost tons of weapons before. Fort Hood, over 100 PVS-14s were stolen at one time. All kinds of shit gets stolen off military bases. Like that's nothing new. That's nothing new. So, yeah. And the military is not going to make a big hullabaloo out of a saw being stolen. That looks really bad for them. So, but anyways, the city of Illinois threw out a similar lawsuit from the city of Chicago. Once again, like they turned around and tried to sue Glock again. And they was about the design, distribution, and marketing practices that contributed to the city's pervasive violence. And they got spanked again. The court observed the firearms industry is highly regulated. And that's so long as the defendants engaged in lawful commercial activity. Within that market, such activity is too removed from the independent criminal acts alleged. Even the D.C. Court of Appeals, once again, they said it's similar. A similar case. And this is the District of Columbia versus Beretta. Now, this was 2005. It's interesting because, they're suing a major defense supplier, which probably didn't help things either. But they cited the same three decisions above. And this court said the sheer number of causal links made the claim far too attenuated to pass muster. And there have been other industries here. This action is not unique to the firearms industry. Both foreign and domestic have targeted industries and analogous suits seeking damages for the distant repercussions of their products' downstream misuse. And they talk about these. And these lawsuits are various industries like tobacco and the finance industry, lead paint. There were massive lead paint lawsuits for a long time. And big pharma. And they point out that there's no doubt Mexico's complaint would be dismissed in all these courts above. But they say Mexico's chain of causation has even more links. American firearms must be smuggled across the border, purchased by a foreign cartel, and then used to commit a criminal act abroad that later results in expenditures of money by a foreign government. So if none of these worked it out all before, Mexico has no chance. Now, they point out the First Circuit, once again, said it was a foreseeable result of the defendant's actions. But how is it really foreseeable? They point out that the only circuit or state high court that it could muster was the 4-3 decision in Cincinnati versus Beretta. This came out of the Ohio Supreme Court. But this case is hardly a model, as Ohio's legislator promptly overturned it. Yes, the Ohio legislator promptly spanked the Supreme Court of Ohio by basically nullifying its ruling by passing laws. So it didn't matter, and that's an entire Ohio political issue we are not going to talk about. Yes, Mexico. Yes, lead paint opens up your third eye. The elected representatives of Ohio agreed with the dissent that allowing this type of claim would create a doctrinal monster. So yes, and then basically it would allow everything. So it got removed. Now they point out there are other precedents this conflicts with. That the PLCAA's predicate exemption allows claims only if the violation of a firearm statute was a proximate cause of the harm for which relief is sought. And they point out, as this court has recognized, we assume that Congress incorporated the common law rule of proximate cause, absent a reason to think otherwise. And they said, first, the chain of causation is too attenuated. And I agree, it is very, very attenuated. You're not to stretch proximate cause beyond the first leap and the first step. You can't just skip over things when it doesn't work. You have to be able to link each step. And multi-step causal chains even involve far fewer steps than the ones here. And they talk about this court rejecting them. Supreme Court's rejected even shorter causal chains. Generally speaking, it's got to be almost like trying to line it up. No, you pretty much have to be like, this happened and then bam, injury. You can't have a 5-step issue. It's got to be like step 1, injury. That's how it has to happen. They point out here, Mexico relies on an 8-step chain of causation. It's peppered with bank shots and border crossings. Yes, that's a lot of steps in a chain. That's like a Rube Goldberg machine. All these things have to happen right, and then you have an injury. But if one thing doesn't happen, well, you don't have your injury anymore. That's why elaborate, multi-step chains of liability generally don't survive in court, because it's impossible to deal with. Well, where are you guys saying? Yes, the lead paint opens your third eyes, and yes, they don't want you to know that. But yes, the causal chain is broken by multiple criminal acts. And volitional acts are superseding causes that eliminate proximate cause. And this is, once again, Supreme Court case law saying that. And intervening criminal acts are a paradigmatic example. And they talk about the Seventh Circuit citing that. So, Mexico's chain relies on 4 separate criminal acts: the straw purchasing, the smuggling, selling guns to the cartels, and then the cartels committing crimes. If this was any other type of case, any other of these acts would break the chain of causation. Taken together, they shatter it. And that's true. That's true. Mexico's injuries are derivative of injuries suffered by others, the victims of the cartels. Proximate cause generally bars suits for alleged harm. You guys are getting a big torts lesson today. When the harm is purely derivative of the misfortunes visited upon a third party by the defendant's acts. Mexico's injuries all come from the cost and resources that derive from its citizens. Notice its citizens being targeted and harmed by the cartels. This is another reason that Mexico stands at too remote a distance to recover. They point out that, once again, apportioning damages and assigning damages, who is responsible, how much are you responsible for, it's unworkable. It's entirely unworkable. And why do we know it's unworkable? Well, there is a parade of bad actors, the straw purchases, the smugglers, the illegal foreign sellers, and the cartel members. How do you apportion fault across this far-reaching chain of actors? Because obviously Smith & Wesson isn't 100% responsible. They're not out there killing people. Okay, well, the cartel members are responsible. Okay, well, how much are they responsible for? How much is the guy who lied and straw purchased a gun? Who is responsible and how responsible are they? That's the issue here. Because if you want to establish like blame, okay, well, who's how do you do that? And are you going to argue that making the gun is worse than murdering somebody? If you're going to blame Mexico, like if you're going to blame Smith & Wesson more than the cartels, you mean the guy's murdering people? It's not, it's not going to work. Like how would that work? Well, we don't, that doesn't make it clear. It doesn't make any sense at all. So it's just a very attenuated claim here. It's very, who's the worst guy here? It wouldn't be the manufacturer at this point. They also point out the majority of legal firearms in Mexico were not made or sold by the defendants. And like I said, guys, that's true. Most weapons found in Mexico come from weapons smuggling, foreign weapon smuggling outside of the United States, or stealing from the Mexican government stockpiles. That's a predominant portion of the cartel's weaponry. When you see the videos of the guys standing up in the back of dump trucks with 50 cal machine guns on top, they're not getting those from gun shows. They're getting those from the Mexican government or military assistance provided to the Mexican government. So why is the Mexican government coming and knocking on Smith & Wesson's door? So again, they're being asked to do the bidding of other people. So they point out that the First Circuit brushed us all aside with the foreseeable consequences of their actions, which that's not right. That's not a right interpretation of this. So it doesn't work. And they say the First Circuit tried to get around this court's precedent by saying that foreseeability is only insufficient in certain contexts. Except foreseeability has pretty much been ruled out forever, but for decades and in many different contexts. Foreseeability is never enough. Foreseeability has been dead for a very long time. And it should be. And it says proximate cause stops at the first step. Not because latter steps are unforeseeable, because they're too remote to count less attached liability for every conceivable harm that can be traced back. And that's the reason why, ultimately. And as I said, how do you establish things? At some point, like, how do you do this? You can't. This court has done it for all kinds of different statutes, from RICO Act issues, federal securities law, the Clayton Act, the Lanham Act. The Lanham Act covers copyright. And they said even if you could do that, there's a exception which includes an express proximate cause requirement. So now the Supreme Court will have said you're bound to follow this, and the state and the First Circuit said no, we're not, and they can't do that. Congress has told them how to interpret the law. So they point out the First Circuit grappled with none of this. It had no response to any of the points above except its repeated refrain that Mexico's injuries were foreseeable. And basically what they're arguing is that they condensed Mexico's chain of causation. When they talk about the trafficking violation was the proximate cause of Mexico's injuries. So the causal chain really had 6 steps, not 8. But remember, 6 steps is 5 too many. But they also point out, once again, proximate cause is always tied to a defendant's violative conduct. And if you haven't violated anything, then there is no proximate cause. But the idea is the idea of aiding and abetting liability. Because they're pointing out it's undisputed the defendants did not themselves violate the laws. Instead, Mexico's allegations the defendants' manufacturing, marketing, and sales activity constitute unlawful aiding and abetting. That's almost like I'm surprised Mexico didn't argue RICO. Because remember, guys, what's the answer? It's never RICO. RICO is never the answer in a lawsuit. And they point out that any of this conduct occurs at least 2 steps before any trafficking. Because remember, it's got to get from the company to the wholesaler or distributor to the gun store. And then someone has to buy it. And then from there, it could get to the cartel. But you're already a couple steps in. You know, from Smith & Wesson to the wholesalers, 1. Wholesaler to gun store is 2. Gun store to firearm owner is 3. And now you're like, okay, hop 4 is at the earliest it can go is straight to the cartel. That's the earliest you could do it, that's probably not happening. So there's probably a couple more people in the chain. I mean, they're talking about a dude in Mexico named Rico. I don't know about that, Brewberries. I'm not so sure about that. Why is chat weird tonight? Well, why just tonight? It's like every night. But that's part of what chat is. That's why you guys are who you are. Oh. So, and they point out that the chain is only a mere 6 steps. And that's still too many under Supreme Court precedent. They point out once again, like all they do is defy precedent. They point out a case here, Tamna. And this is a decision that the First Circuit ignored. They say, as in here, the gravamen of that complaint was that social media companies were where their platforms were being used by terrorists and refused to adopt easy measures to address the problem and were thus liable when they facilitated terrorist activity for their own profit. Now, this all goes back to Tamna goes back to a lawsuit against Twitter, and it stems from ISIS attacking a nightclub back in 2017. They killed a shitload of people. His family sued Twitter, alleging their liability. And the Supreme Court said, like, yeah, no, champ, we ain't doing that. You fail to state a claim. Because it's not part of the Anti-Terrorism Act to sue Twitter, even though Twitter is allowing it for a long time. There were a lot of pages where ISIS members were openly communicating, getting messages out. People were communicating with them. It wasn't impossible. I mean, it was funny back during the days of like when the adults were in charge. You know, you could get banned for having a right-wing view, but if you were talking about cutting people's heads off in Raqqa, oh, well, that was okay, and they'd let you talk. So it was very interesting what they did. But they point out that It's the exact same issues. They didn't monitor the tweets. They weren't taking care of it, and they could have stopped it. Well, how would they have stopped it? And the reasoning there in Tamna should close down this aiding and abetting claim. And it's true, it should. In that case, the court made clear aiding and abetting is an affirmative culpable conduct. A would-be accomplice must take an affirmative act with the intent of facilitating the offense's commission. It's more than omissions and actions or nonfeasance. Ordinary merchants could become liable for any misuse of their goods, no matter how attenuated the relationship to the wrongdoer. And that's true. So you've got to show like active work to help commit crimes. Is Smith and Wesson actively helping? Are they actively cooperating with the cartels? No. Are there omissions and actions or nonfeasance? Well, is there really even an action? No, it's just not enough of what Mexico wants. And Mexico fails to allege any such affirmative culpable conduct. Yeah, and once again, you guys are probably asking, well, what does aiding and abetting mean? Mexico doesn't even know what it means. The allegation of aiding and abetting, encouraging, soliciting, or advising, and that's generally what aiding and abetting statutes are, between the American firearms industry and the drug cartels. Nowhere does Mexico allege the firearms industry has adopted a policy with the specific intent to further the drug cartel's operations. And that's part of it. Has Smith & Wesson done anything saying we want the cartel to win? We're going to help them here. No, they haven't. That would be very illegal. They point out instead that it's the business practices to counteract. They haven't changed its business practice to counteract the proliferation of cartel violence. Okay, I mean, that's all they really have here. And they point out that the refrain is that the defense have failed to go beyond what legislation requires to curtail the supply of firearms and have failed to do so in order to boost profits. Well, if they have legal obligations, they're going to meet those. To turn around and get mad at them for following the law is a little bit insane as well. The law says we have to do X. We do X. Now you're suing them? How is that fair? How is that going to work at all? It doesn't make any sense. Kimbo says, I start the show while you're on a 25-foot ladder. Well. Oh. Danny says, I predict dismissal on no breach of a duty. Well, I just think that there's no proximate cause here. So. They say in illustrative examples, Mexico's allegations about defendants' design decisions. Mexico claims the defendants are culpable because they have to continue to produce weapons of war. America's most popular rifle, the AR-15. Or that'll be the AR Quinceria. That what it is, 15? An arms capable of holding more than 10 rounds. Huh, it's like, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Tellingly, Mexico does not allege that these were created for the purposes of aiding the cartels, nor would any claim be plausible. Instead, they keep claiming that failing to stop producing firearms like the AR-15, they have made a deliberate decision that will continue to aid the cartels. So once again, they're pointing out that, hey, look, we didn't make these guns for the cartel. If we made these knowing the cartel really wanted them and the only people that wanted them, you'd have something. But we aren't doing that. We're making guns and the cartel happens to use them. And the issues regarding marketing, distribution, and manufacturing practices fit the same bill. For example, Mexico faults the defendants for using a 3-tier distribution system that's currently sanctioned by the federal government. They're not requiring unlicensed sellers to conduct background checks at gun shows and attempting to control, and they want them to attempt to control, monitor, and supervise kitchen table sales. Once again, and this is the thing, Smith & Wesson they adopted this system so to bolster the cartels. No, they adopted this so the federal government doesn't get mad at them. And yes, it's the idea that they haven't failed to change their longstanding practices. That is, failing to supplement what the firearms laws require. So once again, Mexico is saying, because you are not doing extra. You're complying with the law, great, but you should do more. That doesn't fucking work. That doesn't work at all. You shouldn't be allowed to do it. Carol says they weren't born into it. And that the firearms industry immediately adopted it. Yes. Yes. Oh, you think you know gun control. Oh, you think you know the Second Amendment betrays you. Oh. So there you go. It's been a minute since I've heard that. Oh, what's it here? Yeah, there's a bunch of these cases. Nico's, it's a great example. It's like Jimmy John's. It's not their fault their sandwich is making me fat. They just make sandwiches. I may happen to eat them. They have no control over that. Yes. Yes, and this gives you power over me, SA? You gotta do, imagine Bane being a cholo gangster. Orale, homies. I don't know how that would work. Anyways, boiled down, the theory of liability is reduced to this. And this is insane. A manufacturer of a dangerous product is an accessory or co-conspirator to illicit conduct by downstream actors where it continues to supply, support, or assist the downstream parties and has knowledge, actual or constructive, of the illicit conduct. I mean, really, there's only one way there's no way to comply to stop all of that. Even if they did all the things Mexico wanted, how would that stop the gun companies from the gun smuggling? It really wouldn't. Because once again, the idea is the straw purchasers are buying guns and there's no way to track it. And then from there, they're being smuggled. How would Smith & Wesson stop smuggling? They say, but this is the precise theory of aiding and abetting liability this court rejected in Tamna. And it is. It's not fucking Twitter's fault that ISIS is using it. Selling a product while knowing that some bad actors will use it downstream is not the sort of affirmative misconduct needed to create accomplice liability. And they say, for instance, every beer and wine company knows that their products are going to end up being unlawfully used by minors or drunk drivers. And they can always take additional steps to combat those problems. But yes, and this goes back to all the gun cases. Nevertheless, nobody would think these companies are aiding and abetting any of those downstream acts. And it's the same is true for companies in many different industries, and the same principle controls here. Fertilizer companies, car companies. Yeah, bad guys use our cars. Drunk drivers use our cars. So I think, and that's why you guys saw the National Association of Manufacturers gave an amicus brief. They did that because they represent all kinds of manufacturers. And the point is, we represent all kinds of businesses you are going to fuck with if you allow this. So that is the issue there. Yeah, Mexico will sue General Motors next. Yeah, because guess what? Guess how everything gets smuggled across the border? With trucks. Yeah, fertilizer companies. I wish we could invest in those. Oh no. Naughty, naughty chat. Naughty, naughty. So now in this case, in the First Circuit said that the gun companies are more active participants in the cartel's business than Twitter was when ISIS was using it. How? Literally, Twitter puts the thing up, Twitter hosts the app, ISIS uses the app. I mean, that is the shortest. There's no attenuation there. Twitter makes, Twitter puts its app up on the internet. The cartel uses it. That's pretty close. Like, boom, one step, but it's bad guys using is not something you could reasonably foresee. How do you control it? I mean, that's such a short step there. My friend says they're hoping for a payout. Probably no. This is all about domestic gun control, and they're using Mexico for it. Like I said, there's a reason why we see the 10-round thing. Because in Mexico, 10-round magazines would still be illegal. There's a reason why this is being argued. And it's to do the bidding of domestic gun control organizations. And Barton Bell is right. Can we sue Boeing for 9/11? Yeah. Very good argument. And they point out Mexico alleges no connection between the petitioners and the cartels, other than the sale of lawful products with at its worst indifference to how they will be used later. And yeah, guys, there is they point out that even when a company is engaged in extensive commercial activity, it is not an active participant in downstream criminal acts unless the company engages in some other affirmative misconduct for the purpose of promoting those acts. And there's nowhere where Smith and Wesson goes running around saying, "Hey guys, orderly, like let's go smoke those Zetas across the street. You want to kill some Zetas? Use the Smith and Wesson M&P 15. It'll help you out, Holmes." Or SA, when you got to shoot it out with the government, get you an M&P in 9mm. You'll be the king of the vatos. It's like, no, there's none of that. There's none of that. Yes, hola, Levato. What's happening? Yes. Yes, this is just, there's so much of this that doesn't work. And to open it up like that, yes, Twitter would be sued all the time. I mean, especially, think about it. Like, if you lived in Ukraine, people could sue them saying, well, hey, you allow the Russian foreign ministry and the Russian government, all kinds of groups. For a while, Hezbollah and Hamas were using Twitter. Everybody could. Yes. Yes, and get the new Smith & Wesson bodyguard. Dose. 0.0 for your chica, too. Oh, yeah. Yes. They point out Mexico does not even try to make the showing. Mexico's theory is the defendants have known the cartels have been able to obtain their guns for years. And they say, and the Supreme Court's already said, failing to stop a problem of downstream criminal activity distinct from its existence, and that distinction is critical for aiding and abetting liability. And knowing bad guys are out there, well, okay. So what do you want them to do? So it's absolute nonsense. But the First Circuit goes back to a 1943 case, direct sales versus the United States. That whenever a merchant continues to sell lawful products despite knowing that some may end up in the hands of criminals, that is enough to support a claim that the merchant intended to supply the products for those illegal sales. That is absolutely fucking bonkers. This is absolutely bonkers. That was a bad Cheech impression. It offends the beaner in me. Oh. You know, I mean, but guys, look at this. Look at how it used to be. Look how insane it is. If you know people are using your stuff to do something illegal. I mean, imagine like you're Sudafed. You make Sudafed. Well, bad guys might use it. That's your fault. You're liable for that. Like, there's nothing you can make that people probably can't use to commit a crime. If I start making digital scales, drug dealers use those. You know, there's literally nothing. If I make cigarette lighters, crackheads are going to use those. Meth addicts are going to use those. Arsonists will use them. There's literally not like you make Ziploc baggies. Guess what? We put drugs in those. You make straws. People are going to snort cocaine with them. You make syringes. People are going to intravenously inject drugs with them. So if you know that's happening, like, is that the argument that every company out there that makes something is now liable? It's not even just certain industries, chat. Like, literally, I mean, everybody. If I'm a criminal, like, criminals might make notes. So they're trying to plan things, you know, what Stringer Bell says, like, here.
Nigga, is you taking notes on a criminal fucking conspiracy? What the fuck is you thinking, man?
Criminals use pens and paper. Bic and Pilot. They're on the hook because if they're helping criminals organize and assort themselves. This logic, we have to restrict sales so criminals can't take notes and streamline their organizations. You know, this is nonsense. Somebody's saying there's no plastic straws in Canada. Well, I can't help you there. It's just, this is nonsense. That would be a nonsense ruling to have that being for, like, there's a good reason why that's on the trash heap of history. You know, bad guys are using your stuff. It's like, if I ran a company making, like, I'm sure that Pepsi, there are bad guys out there drinking Pepsi or Coca-Cola. You know, criminals drink Coca-Cola. You know, or Michael Jordan. Like Michael Jordan says, Republicans buy sneakers too. Criminals wear socks. You know, criminals wear socks so they don't get blisters on their feet. You're aiding and abetting criminal liability, chat. There's literally no way around it. Yeah, Puffer Smiles. Yes, it's saying, if I crocheted a scarf using a smothering, yeah, that actually could be an issue for you. Or like a 2.0 made a necklace for somebody and was using a strangulation. Like, at what point is there not liability? Oh. They're pointing out direct sales said no such thing. Instead, it involved a company selling morphine directly to a particular doctor in absurdly large amounts that it could not have possibly been used for lawful purposes. So in direct sales, they're selling like a literal ton of morphine to this doctor. We'll send you 100,000 units a month. What are you using them all for? Medical stuff. They're like, okie dokie. That's the issue. That it wasn't clearly not being used. And that's the thing. And I think a fair analog to that would be if Smith & Wesson got a Smith & Wesson sitting there saying, like, hey, order for 15,000 AR-15s and we need to send them to the coordinates in the Guadalajara desert. Okay, let's make them. That would get them in trouble. Oh, 2.0 can sell them as garrots. That would be funny. That would be funny. Maybe she'll make some. Did you hear that, sweetheart? You should. They want you to start making garrots and things they can strangle people with. You said okay. Does that mean you're thinking about it? She'll take it under advisement, chat. There's a chance. A little bit of a chance. A little bit of a chance. Just as small. So, she's not going to do it, chat. She's not going to do it. So, but they point out, though, but here, Mexico's complaint does not allege any unusual activity on the part of the firearms industry. There's no change of course, no specific action, no design policy. That's meant to help the cartels. Rather, Mexico objects to how the industry has operated for decades. Its entire complaint is premised entirely on the usual operations of the American firearms industry. True. And they just point out America's firearms industry is not a long-standing criminal accomplice to the cartels. That's the job of the U.S. government. Shh, chat, shh. No, chat. Shh. No. You don't have arrest. You don't have information to lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. So, anyways, this goes on. They point out the questions presented are exceptionally important. And they are. And as the National Association of Manufacturers pointed out, the logic of the decision below exposes a wide swath of industry to liability for doing nothing more than making available legal and non-defective products. Yeah, and that's the thing. Normally, tort liability only comes under products liability if you have defective things. So, like, if Smith & Wesson makes a gun and I shoot it and it explodes on me, and it turns out they're making defective products, then yes, I have the right to sue them, and they can't hide behind the PLCAA. Products liability is still something that is an actionable tort. They also point out Mexico's brazen attempt to regulate the American firearms industry poses a grave threat to the sovereignty of the United States, its citizens, and Second Amendment rights. And yes, that's very critical. Like Mexico, it's very much like a Boardwalk Empire. If you guys have ever seen when Van Alden's about to get killed, and he says, you're Capone, and some guy comes in your house and tells Capone how to act, that's pretty goddamn disrespectful. And it is. Very fucking disrespectful. Yes, Brimstone is right. We backed the Sinaloa cartel. Well, we backed them, but we've also helped other things. Like we basically inadvertently created the Zetas. Who knew? Who knew training some questionable guys in the Mexican Special Forces would lead to them turning into a violent gang of criminals? Oh, jeez. Wow. Ugh. Yes, Robert says, all these hammers keep exploding. You joke, but my professor in torts class actually used that as an example. There is some basic premise that you can use items safely. Like if I start using a hammer and all of a sudden it explodes, it burns my house down, I probably have a very reasonable right to sue them for products liability. Report me for spoilers. Yes, you can rule by fear or with love. So the decision involves two important issues of federal law. One, the First Circuit split from other appellate courts as to what traditional understandings of proximate cause are. And this is a big thing because this will upend tort cases in federal courts across the country. So once again, it's products liability, but it's also, for example, like if you get in a car accident, there are going to be situations at times you can sue in federal court. Proximate cause will be it something that has to be defined and argued and litigated. This will affect that. This has very wide-reaching effects. It's not just Second Amendment related. And they say the First Circuit's decision defies a previous Supreme Court decision in Tamna by allowing claims of accomplice liability against anyone who makes products available to the general public, while knowing some criminals will use them. So yes, once again, it's literally everything and anybody is going to be affected by this. For just basic tort law and then products liability for every manufacturer, every company in America. Because remember, Twitter, they just have ones and zeros and they were facing liability that they won. But you make an Uber app and some guy Ubers to where he goes and does a mass shooting. Is Uber now liable? Well, bad guys might use it. How did you know you didn't make sure he wasn't going to commit a crime where you were going? You didn't frisk him for weapons. Like there's so many ways this can be used. The Roundup turning the frogs gay, yes. But yes, these holdings have implications far beyond the firearms industry. Yes, it's just it also expands the ability of governments to bring suit over alleged harms, from climate change to consumer goods and all in between. A city or state could sue fast food industry for facilitating childhood obesity, or a pharmaceutical company for continuing to sell cold medicines that criminals use to make illegal drugs. Yeah, you could sell to people who make Sudafed. Remember, in New York City, when Michael Bloomberg was the mayor, they wanted to ban large capacity drinks over a certain amount. Well, they could turn around and sue those manufacturers saying, you make drinks that make people fat. They could sue My Precious Jimmy John's and say, you made Sean fat. It would all work. It would all work. And they point out that you don't need an imagination to do this. Once again, cities and states have tried these sorts of lawsuits plenty of times. But basic norms of American law have largely stopped these attenuated gambits. There has to be a direct nexus between the injury and the action. So that's the big problem here. That is the big problem here. And then they bring up the American sovereignty issues because it allows a foreign government to regulate the manufacture and sale of common firearms in the United States. Simply put, Mexico to test the American system. It makes no secret of its view that ordinary citizens should not be allowed to buy an AR-15 or a firearm capable of holding over 10 rounds. And it finds abhorrent how law-abiding Americans have the liberty to obtain such items without having to beg for the government's grace. Yes, they do. Mexico has routinely stated that. They think it's wrong. And Ron, you're saying, didn't they already go down this road when they sued cigarette manufacturers? Yeah, pretty much. But remember, the cigarette manufacturers still had to settle, but that was under a different theory of liability. Absent court intervention, Mexico will be handed a de facto domestic regulatory tool as it saddles American firearms makers with burdensome litigation, far-reaching compulsory discovery, and the specter of a multi-billion-dollar judgment it can wield to bully the industry into altering its practices. And that says nothing of the proposed injunctive relief, which seeks to impose gun control regulations that Congress has repeatedly rejected. And that becomes another issue. Congress has said, no, we're not doing these gun laws. But through this injunction, Mexico would be allowed to demand firearms companies do X, Y, and Z, which probably under Bruin would be unconstitutional. But Smith & Wesson and these other companies are going to have to get to that point, which is years and years down the road. They might suffer tremendous problems and harm. It's way too far away. It's way too far away. You guys are something else. No, I am not a Jersey Mike's fan. Sorry, J-Rock. They point out that is not all. Even if the defendants prevail down the road, so long as this decision remains good law, other people will be allowed to do it. Other countries will try to run the same playbook, and they'll come to the First Circuit. And even if they don't come to the First Circuit, they'll say, look, Judge, the First Circuit said it was okay. And they point out that, in fact, other countries have promised so much already, describing foreign interest in the case. Yeah. So, and they point out that when they passed the PLCAA, Congress recognized the severe cost of defending suits like this one that could pressure firearms companies to curtail their business practices, jeopardizing democratic control. That danger is especially acute when it comes from foreign governments as they seek to use lawfare to suppress American firearms with no accountability to the American people. And that's true also. We have no ability to control the Mexican government. There's no accountability. We can't go vote in their elections. You need to have an ID to go vote in Mexico. So we're all screwed. So that's a big problem here. J-Rock, I don't fucking like Firehouse. It's ugh. And Subway's ugh. Jimmy John's actually probably has the best subs. Everybody else is kind of fucking suck. The only other competitor to Jimmy John's is Mr. Hero, but that's a Cleveland thing, so there you go. Yeah, I know, but if Penn Station disappeared, I wouldn't be sad. And they point out that under the First Circuit, American courts in the Northeast are now open to suits. And that is intolerable for a country with the Second Amendment. The problem is, though, the Second Amendment's void in Massachusetts anyway. The suit threatens to undermine American sovereignty and constitutional liberty. And it has no business in this country's courts. And I agree. Now, they are pointing out there's some things here, guys. And yes, this case down at the trial court level never got far. It was at the motion to dismiss. So they're limited to the four corners of the complaints. So there is no record. In these other cases we've heard, and they talk about the discovery and things that were presented on the record, there's no lengthy factual record. This is just a very, very straightforward case. The questions are simply whether those facts amount to aiding and abetting and satisfy proximate cause. Now, they're arguing in the alternative summary reversal is done. And they could say the First Circuit's decision is so egregiously wrong, summary reversal would be appropriate. And that happens sometimes when the lower courts will do something so blatantly fucking wrong, the Supreme Court doesn't even do an opinion, they don't have oral arguments. They just go ahead and say, nope, this is wrong. We looked at everything, and we are just going to reverse it. And they do that sometimes. They sometimes do it. They don't require additional briefing. So let's say, for example, tomorrow, the state of Ohio said you could be executed for shoplifting. And let's say that it went up straight on an appeal to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court look at it and go, yeah, you can't do that. We don't even have to waste time. It's so stupid and so wrong. Automatically reversed. So, yes, can we sue Mexico for being a shithole? That would be a good one, yes. Yes. That would be the bigger problem there. Yes, can we sue you guys for being a shitty country? They'd say, that's not fair. No. It's like, but it's true. But it's true. Oh. Now, this is a natural candidate for summary reversal. Now, here it didn't happen. Certiorari was granted, which is kind of like the second best thing, because seeing in the alternative. So Smith and Wesson kind of got what they wanted. So we'll see. What the heck was that? Oh, there are the dogs. Summary reversal because it involves a threshold immunity from suit. But it didn't happen, so we can skip this because they didn't address it. Supreme Court's like, nope, we're going to continue. So this was signed. The writ of certiorari should be granted. Well, the Supreme Court did grant it. And with the Jones Day attorneys, yep. An additional counsel is listed on the next page. And these are all the other attorneys. Now, remember, this was signed by all the other attorneys involved. So, like the counsel for Barrett, counsel for Glock, the Glockenspiel, the counsel for Beretta. A lot of other counsel was involved in this one. So, there's even more. The counsel for Interstate Arms, which is Whitmer Public Safety Group Incorporated, which is a funny name. Counsel for Century Arms. They should be punished for just having shitty guns. Counsel for Colt and the counsel for Sturm Ruger. And these are all very big firms, guys. These are all pretty decent-sized firms that they're dealing with. A bunch of these you'll have heard in one form or another. Some of these are a little more regional, but yeah. So there you go. Das Juden Glocken. No, they're not Juden. Oh, there we go. So that is what the gun industry put together. Love is a Glockenspiel, yes. No Springfield. Well, Springfield wasn't sued, so it doesn't matter. It's only countries that were sued. I'm sorry, only companies that were sued are involved. So Springfield Manufacturing, Springfield Armory is not involved. Other companies aren't involved because they weren't sued. Like CZ wasn't sued. I mean, technically, because they're like it's Colt CZ, maybe you could argue that. But I mean, really, Sig Sauer wasn't sued, which is very interesting. Very interesting because Sig makes AR-15s too. And Sig Sauer P226s, P229s, I'm sure are just awash in Mexico as well. Mr. Pibb, Dr. Pepper, root beer, all that shit is awful. No. Fucking nasty. So, one of the Jets players may have broken his neck. Oh, no. That's not good. That's not good. Sig got that juicy government contract. They did. And I'm sure that was probably part of the issue here is they didn't want to piss off the federal government because Sig now has the making of the M18 and M17 pistols for the United States government, as well as working on the next generation squad weapons and the new service rifle for the U.S. military. So I think they left Sig alone not to piss off the government. So hold on here. What? When was the last time you saw Clyde? Last night. We had Clyde. So. Let's see here. Now, Mexico went, no. We just want to file grande lawsuits. Ay. Un necesito. But yes, Smith and Wesson did file a response. They did file a response here. Okay, well, yes, that's why they should fuck with SIG, because modern SIG is trash, though. Yeah, more or less. 6 hours been trash for a long time. And Sad Clown says that's why SIG undercut Colt offer so much, to get out of the way of the government. Yeah, they wanted government protection. Ah, yes, but then we have in response fighting out of the blue corner from the land of sombreros and enchiladas, the Estados Unidos Mexicano. Yes, so they're brief in opposition. Now remember, they're asking for the certiorari petition to be denied. They're not saying, "Oh, grant it," and then we want to argue. No, they're saying, "Fuck these guys, they're wrong." So it's all in opposition, saying, "Don't grant it, judges. Don't grant it." Well, sadly, we know this was all for naught. Now we do see some interesting organizations here. They have the Global Action on Gun Violence, and that is who Mexico is using. So it's global action there, yes. And they're using Logan Lovels of the United States, which they're no slouch. So the questions presented, and this is where the Supreme Court will help define and say, here's the question we want you to address. And it's the same question. Now theirs is a little shorter, because they're arguing it shouldn't matter. So this is funny. I love this. I love it when they go this. Here are the actual facts. Fact checked by real patriots. Oh. Fact checked by real patriots. Mexico's complaint alleged that, far from mere knowledge, the petitioners deliberately chose to engage in unlawful affirmative conduct to profit off the criminal market for their products. They said the petitioners deliberately aided and abetted the unlawful sale of firearms to purchasers, supplying brutal cartels in Mexico. Really, but how? You don't prove how that happened. You don't offer an explanation how that happened. And they say, as for consequences, and this is just so cringe, a long road lies between the First Circuit's decision and a final judgment. The district court will resolve other asserted grounds for dismissal, including lack of personal jurisdiction and failure to state a claim under state law that it did not previously address. After discovery will come summary judgment, then potential trial, and then appeal. The petitioner's challenges are best addressed on a developed factual record. And that's not a bad argument to make. Judge, you don't know what to argue with here. You don't have all the facts, and we'll give them to you. And if it proves necessary to address them at all, that is why this court routinely denies petitions seeking review of a suit at such an early stage. Well, we know this is all the court said no. Let's hear it. So, yeah, this didn't work out well for you guys. Oh. But they make arguments. There is no circuit split. This does not present a split. They bring up that the petitioners muster only cases decided before the PLCAA's enactment under various state common law proximate cause doctrines. Yeah. And on less egregious and less detailed allegations than those here. Now, I think that's interesting. They're basically poo-pooing and shushing off, saying, oh, well, all those people getting shot in the hood, it doesn't matter. Which is very revealing for people on the left to make that kind of an argument. Oh, don't care about all those black folks getting shot in the hood. No. What matters is that Mexicans are getting shot. No, fuck all those black people, is basically what they're saying. They haven't got real proof of nothing. Oh my God, chat. This is so bad. This is so bad, the arguments they make. And that's the funny part about the left. It's so racist at times. They point out petitioners don't even try to argue that the Court of Appeals decision on their second question regarding aiding and abetting splits with any decision after other decision. The theory is that the decision broke with Tamna, which is barely a year old. So what? It's Supreme Court precedent. It doesn't matter if it came out 15 minutes ago. And I would argue more importantly, if it's brand new, there's even more reason for the court to adhere to it. The court's going to say, we just decided this. If it was 50 years old, you might be able to chip away and say, hey, times have changed. But to argue, oh, it's barely a year old, that means it doesn't mean anything. That's not how this works. Did the court decide something? Yes. Is the court bound by stare decisis? Yes. Absent reasons not to be. And just saying, oh, well, it's brand new, well, then that means the court can't make, what's the timeline? What's the cutoff here? That is such an awful fucking argument. That's such an awful fucking argument for them to make. How does that work? How does that work? You just doesn't know. Yes, it's new and shiny law. Yes, it's the law isn't old enough. It's a stalker child law. Yes. The law's so young, even Melton doesn't want to touch it. The petitioners argue the merits on the merits fare no better. But the Court of Appeals considered every proximate cause principle. Well, except for the ones the Supreme Court uses. So they talk about Mexico's lawsuit. The cartels in Mexico are a transnational criminal organization heavily involved in the drug trade. Well, completely involved in the drug trade. The cartels are brutally violent. They have killed thousands of civilians across Mexico. Yes, so is the Mexican government. On their own, and for the corrupt ones at the behest of the cartels. So I'm just saying, a lot of dead bodies are sponsored by the Mexican government. And they regularly clash with the Mexican military and federal police. Not really. The federal police run away all the time. The cartel's firepower largely derives from their firepower, much of which comes from the petitioners. Really? Really? I mean, I just don't understand how that works. There's so many of these, when you see I just, when you look at some of this stuff here, for example, this is something, and I will say the Mexican Marines are probably the most uncompromised group of Mexican military. They're actually probably the most reliable. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, I don't know, all these grenades. Where are we buying grenades at, chat? I want grenades. Where's this MG34 in the background? I want one of those. Where are we getting MG34s, chat? And then RPG7s. What fucking gun store has these? What kind of gun store has those? I want an RPG. Now, I will say, yes, they do have a high point down here, which is hilarious. They have another high point right there. And yes, there are some of these guns that clearly came from American gun stores and gun owners. This Uzi right here, Uzi 9mm, as Arnold might say, with the really long barrel. This F2000 by Fabrique Nationale, or the P90. I'm sorry, it's a P90. The P90 with the long barrel, okay, yeah, that came from America because that's not something you can buy there. But a lot of this is not from gun owners. There's an M203 right here. You can't just buy those. This 37mm launcher, okay, but you can't do shit with it. I mean, that's cringe. Some cartel member used that to scare people because that wasn't actually going to be used. But you have another machine gun right here, another belt-fed machine gun. Where the fuck do you think they're getting these? Another M203. You got some HK weapons down here. But more importantly, these fucking grenades. Although these grenades look like they were dug out of the dirt, they look heavily damaged. Those aren't from America. A lot of these aren't going to be from America. Yeah, the pile of grenades. Yeah, semi-auto grenades. So, we're going to go back here, chat. We're going to go back. You know, the PS90's Galil's everything. Yep, noob tubes everything. So they say unable to source firearms in Mexico. Mexico has strong domestic gun laws and only one gun store. Except when you buy them from the Mexican government, because they'll sell them to you, or you just steal them. But yes, there is only one gun store in Mexico, and it's in Mexico City. We talked about this earlier. The Army runs it. Traffickers arming the cartels have flocked to the United States for decades. Well, that really is. It's like probably the mid-2000s. Petitioner's firearms are particularly popular among the cartels. Between 340,000 and 597,000 of petitioner's weapons are trafficked into Mexico every year. Now, it's not like petitioners. Remember, guys, petitioners are not just Smith & Wesson. Petitioners are the other parties, Barrett, Glock, Beretta, Colt, all these other groups as well, Ruger. It's not just Smith & Wesson, because Smith & Wesson doesn't make 350,000 guns in a year. It's all of those together. Yeah, we should close the border. That's what these gun companies should have said. Fine, we agree to close the border. We'll make AI run killing machines patrolling the border. There, sorry, thanks Mexico, we fixed it. Drop the lawsuit, and I'll be like, no. They'd be like, ay, no, los míos, nah. That would be a great way to handle it. That'd be a great way to handle it. Yes, border C. Oh. The most popular method by which cartels obtain the guns is through straw purchasing. Third parties buying guns for the cartels who purchase firearms at directly licensed firearms dealers. Okay, well, yeah, straw purchasing is a crime for the purchaser, and for decades, who, among other things, have reasonable cause to believe the purchaser of buying guns to be trafficked. Well, yeah, so why aren't you selling the individual gun store owners? They're the ones who sold it. But anyways, the flood, it was a flood of guns into Mexico was no accident. It results from the knowing and deliberate choice to supply their products to bad actors, to allow reckless and unlawful practices. What unlawful practice? If there's an unlawful practice, go tell the ATF. They will beat their dicks raw to go after American gun companies that feed the crime gun pipeline. So we have a school to prison pipeline, and now we have a crime to gun pipeline. There's all kinds of pipelines, except for pipelines carrying oil. Am I right, chat? Get a little domestic on you there, domestic policy. And they say petitioners will drive up, will drive up demand among the cartels. Yes. How do they design to market their products? I have not seen any Smith & Wesson ads or Barrett ads saying like, hey, Holmes. You have to get rid of those pendeos down the street. Here you go. Here's the puta eliminator. Like, where do they think there's any marketing for this? 90% of guns and used in crimes are sold by a known subset of dealers. Yeah, I'd like the citation needed. And the crime gun pipeline could be curtailed if those dealers were not supplied and were required to sell guns safely. This is no closely held secret. As far back as 2001, the DOJ urged petitioners to stop supplying those high crime gun sellers and require their dealers to use safe sales practices. Why doesn't the DOJ go and, if they know those guys are doing it, if you know people are breaking the law, why aren't you arresting them? Chat. I mean, that's really funny. It's also weird. It's like that meme with the little kid. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. How does that work? It makes your noggin jogging a little bit. See, over a decade ago, public reporting identified by name 12 dealers that sold the most guns recovered in Mexico. And in the years since, many government reports, academic reports, and news articles have documented in detail the rampant trafficking from sources in the United States to Mexico. If you know where they're coming, why aren't you stopping the smugglers? Why aren't you stopping the smugglers, Mexico? You know, are you Mexicans or Mexicans? You know, are you just a bunch of little putas? You can't stop them. Is that it? Is that it? Like, why can't you guys do it? Oh. Anyways, a trace request from the ATF reports that track firearms collected at crime scenes back to their source. Yes. Identify the firearms that petitioners sell to specific distributors and dealers that are being recovered at crime scenes in Mexico. The complaint alleges dozens of specific incidents of dealers unlawfully selling petitioners' firearms to cartel-linked traffickers. Yes, and a bunch of those were done at the behest of the DOJ. So it's like the federal government told them to do it because they were going to track it. And then they didn't track it, and they also didn't tell you guys. So why aren't you mad at the ATF? Because Fast and Furious is not the fault of anybody else. Hey, this is I'm like such this is a comedy show. I'm just saying, chat. Oh. The complaint alleges that petitioners intentionally foster this trade. Do they? Even when dealers conspire with and advise cartel traffickers on how to evade law enforcement, well, why aren't you going after these dealers? The petitioners chose to supply them. Why aren't if you know this is happening, why aren't they being stopped? Why aren't they being stopped if you know this is happening? Why are you letting it continue? Why? Oh. So they point out that Smith and Wesson reneged, and I'm like, well, you guys don't get to use that word down in Mexico. On a 2000 federal settlement addressing the same unlawful practices cartels use to get weapons. Well, then why don't you seek to enforce that? It's a lot of Mexicant here. That's all I'm hearing. They point out the marketing and design choices similarly reflect an international effort to sustain the illegal firearms trade into Mexico. Petitioners market firearms to intentionally cater to cartel demand, such as Colt's Mexico-themed pistols. One with the Emiliano Zapata 1911 is engraved with the Mexican revolutionary's dictum, "It is better to die standing than to live on your knees." It is a particular favorite of the cartels. It's a particular favorite of anybody who believes in liberty and personal freedom. Next, they're going to say, the way they say that, the way this is written so clinically, it's like, yes, and he is a paramilitary leader, an Eagle Scout. Yes. You can also find guns that have "Don't tread on me," led by the band of insurgents during the Revolutionary War. That's their one. That's their one. This is the one thing they have. They have one example of that, and that's it. Mexico has had to spend vast funds on a wide range of services to fight the unlawful trafficking. Scores of Mexican federal police and service members have been killed by weapons trafficked from the United States. Cool. American law enforcement has suffered too. What about... Never mind, not going to say it. Between 2006 and 2021, guns were used to kill 415 members of the federal police or National Guard. How many of those were on the cartel payroll? I'm just saying, how many of these guys were on the cartel payroll? Probably most of them. And by most, probably like all. Sad but true. Sad but true. The vast majority of these guns were trafficked from the U.S. Over a similar time frame, U.S. origin guns were used to kill 25 members of the Mexican military and wound another 84. U.S. origin guns were also used to cause tens of millions of dollars in damage to Mexican military aircraft and vehicles, cartel-linked violence. And while Mexico has tried to combat this unlawful trafficking, its considerable efforts in those of the United States have not staunched the flow of guns into its territory. All I get, it's a bunch of Mexicans. They can't do it. Yes, only 415 cops. Those are rookie numbers. You need to up your numbers. Yeah, how many cops? Yeah. From 2000 to present. Let's see here. Let's do the numbers. So hold on here. What number are they citing again? So between 2006 and 2021. Okay, so 15 years, 415 divided by 15. Hold on here. Calculador. I know that's Spanish for calculator. 415 divided by 15 is equal to 27 and 2/3. So we'll round up to 28. 28 officers on every year. And on average from 1980 to 2014 in America, an average of 64 law enforcement officers were feloniously killed per year. So let's see here. Although apparently there are other deaths there. But yes, so like 64 or so. Well, in 10 years from 2006 to 2016, that's over 600. We're already doing better. Number one for America. USA. We do it all, chat. We do it all. We do better. We go for the high score, chat. We go for the high score in America. We supersize everything. Oh. Yes, USA es número uno. Yes. Estados Unidos es número uno. Estados Unidos los premium. Oh, I think that's how you'd say it. El Premio. El Premier. They go on to talk about the protection of lawful stroke mode. The Protection of Lawful Commerce and Firearms Act. Now they talk about protecting unlawful commerce. Well, they point out that if you knowingly violate standard federal statutes applicable to the sale or marketing of firearms, where the violation was a proximate cause of harm for which the relief is sought. Well, that's the exemptions, which is a predicate exception. They didn't violate state or federal laws. So what law did they violate? So it allows manufacturers to be held liable for their own tortious or unlawful conduct. It doesn't protect you from any lawsuits based on their own negligence or criminal conduct. And that's the thing, chat. If they have products liability issues, like the guns are defective, you can still sue them. But this is absolute garbage here. Well, what have they done? They try to point out all the cases that did proceed were civil liability actions against manufacturers. They talk about the Bushmaster one. And that's when Bushmaster turned into Wyndham weaponry. Remington got sued. There was that going up to Supreme Court. There's the Smith & Wesson versus City of Gary, Indiana. There's all kinds. There's a lot of these that were granted. Minnesota versus Fleet Farm, LLC. Fleet Farm is kind of like Tractor Supply, except they sell guns. And they're big up in Minnesota. Minnesota sued them for violence in the cities. There was a case in Nevada against Slide Fire. The Brady campaign sued Walmart. Now, there's all kinds of shit that's going on. They talk about their complaint spanning 135 pages, replete with detailed factual allegations. Mexico asserted claims for negligence, el negligence, public nuisance, defective condition of the products. They're not defective. They fucking worked. They put holes in things. Negligence per se, gross negligence, unjust enrichment, and restitution. I don't understand the unjust enrichment theory, because unjust enrichment is the idea that I gave you something and you never gave me a benefit, so you were unjustly enriched. Yeah. Yes, these all survived motion to dismiss, but they all lost later. Yes. So, who's Gary? Job well done. No, Gary, Indiana. The city of Gary. Gary, Indiana, right outside Chicago. Like when you're driving to Chicago, if you're coming from the east, and you're driving west of Chicago on I-80, you run into like a really fucking awful area. And that's Gary, Indiana. And that's a really dangerous place. You don't ever want to go there. And that's like worse than Chicago. Like there's Chirac. Well, if there's Chirac, then like Gary, Indiana is like Fallujah. It's 100 times worse. Fallujah, Gary, Indiana is really dangerous. It's really bad. You don't want to break down there. You don't want to break down in Gary, Indiana. I can tell you that much. Yes, you run through Gary, Indiana if you have to. If your car breaks down, it's like Black Hawk Down. You just start running down the street, shooting over your shoulder, like at the end when they're trying to escape. Yeah, it's Gary's really bad. It used to be good. It had a lot of steel mills and stuff, but that's Gary, Indiana, like 50 years ago. It's a lot's happened since then. Yes, the land of no red lights. Gary's barely better than Gaza. Ooh. Oh no. So, Youngstown, Ohio is getting bad again. Youngstown, Ohio has always been bad. Youngstown, Ohio has always been bad, man. Okay, so anyways, they're pointing out that they're believing that these guys engaged in violations of their actions. So they point out that the First Circuit said the defendants don't contend that the complaint fails to allege widespread sales of firearms by dealers in knowing violation of several state and federal statutes. Well, then why don't you go after them? Why isn't the government cracking down on these guys? And they point out that, if Mexico were to prove that a defendant aided and abetted, they'd be liable. Well, yeah, no shit. Instead, the defendants contend that even for the pleading purposes, the facts plausibly don't support the theory that they have aided and abetted unlawful sales. Yeah. Like this idea the defendants don't dispute the predicate section would apply. Yeah, because it would. If they were actually doing something illegal, like the idea of a plaintiff or a defendant saying, look, there's an exception. We aren't covered by that exception. But if we were, then yes, our actions would be actionable. I mean, read that part, guys. Read that part right here. Read this part right here. Nor do defendants dispute the predicate exception of Section 7903 would apply if Mexico were to prove that a defendant aided and abetted any such violation. Well, yeah. Isn't that what you kind of want people to agree? Yes, if we broke the law, you could punish us for breaking the law. I mean, really? It's just, this is nonsense. I think, this is, they said after surveying Mexico's allegations, the court first concluded that by passing along guns, knowing the purchasers included unlawful buyers, and making the design and marketing decisions targeting towards those individuals, you're aiding and abetting sales. They said, far from passive indifference, Mexico had plausibly alleged the defendants engage in conduct with the intent of growing and maintaining an illegal market in Mexico from which they receive substantial revenues. I can't imagine, like, if I'm Barrett or Glock or Smith & Wesson and I wanted to make that money, it's far easier to sell guns to the Mexican government, let them get stolen, or however they get stolen or end up in the cartel's hands, and just say, hey, Mexico, sounds like womp womp. I guess you got to buy more. That would be where you made the money, not going to the cartels and fucking doling them out. That's not going to make you money. You make money by selling. You let the government do the arms smuggling. That's where the money's made, chat. That's where you make money. But they would pay you in pesos. Well, I mean, technically, yes, but hey, it's what it is, man. They point out that under the Tabna case, that the gun companies were alleged to be much more active participants in the alleged activity than were Twitter. Now, the court explains these are remarkably analogous to those in direct sales, where, they say the defendant must have known the sales volume meant there were likely illegal sales, and by encouraging volume sales, the defendant could have been found to have intended to supply the products for the illegal sales. Were these guys asking for obscene amounts of guns or the normal amounts everybody else has? It's the same amounts everybody else has. So once again, this is all just fucking garbage. And they just keep going and saying that, there is no split. Well, but there is a split. But they point out that the PLCAA's predicate exceptions wouldn't affect the state law case, except it would. State law would be preempted by the federal law. So yes, the city of Philadelphia versus Beretta would not have gone anywhere. But it's a similar game on a similar fact pattern. So while they're saying, yes, these aren't federal, it's the same theory of liability. The same thing for Ganem versus Smith & Wesson, Chicago versus Beretta, District of Columbia versus Beretta. And they point out that, the highest court of the state is the final arbiter on what is state law. Yes, but the PLCAA would have prevented all these. So this is just them whining and saying no. But it's you who don't understand the law, Judge. Oh. But as they go through here, they point out that these are different stretches and definitions of proximate cause. What they want to do is they point out the criminal conduct in this case isn't severing the chain. They point out if a third party's unlawful act always undercuts proximate cause, the predicate exception would be meaningless. So they point out the issues that they know about the unlawful sales, that they have ready availability of firearms. But that's where they point out the ready availability of firearms in the nation at large and the sheer number of variety of opportunities by which persons intent on acquiring them unlawfully can do so. Well, yeah, there's a shitload of guns, but that's what? 250 years of doing it? Well, that's your fault now. No, guns have always been readily available. Yes, and they point out Mexico has one gun store, and they issue less than 50 gun permits per year. Yes. There are derivative injuries. So the way they underline all of this is just pointing out this doesn't work. This doesn't work. And they point out the PLCAA does not create a cause of action and does not define proximate cause. You're right, it doesn't. They say state law causes of action proceeding through the predicate exception are thus governed by the law of the relevant state. Now, this guy says Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins. This goes back to the 1930s. This is what's called the Erie Doctrine. That's been around forever. Well, it's not been around forever, but since then. And if you guys go through civil procedure class, they will talk about this, what the Erie Doctrine is, and how you use it and how it's applied. It's about how federal courts apply state law to certain cases. So that's how you do it. When you have to apply state law. So they're suing in Massachusetts, and they're arguing proximate cause is defined in Massachusetts. We sued under Massachusetts tort law. Therefore, the PLCAA doesn't matter, which I don't think it's going to get them anywhere. So they keep going through this here, and they keep going and going and going for another multiple pages. And one of the things I think is funny, and they go through this, and they like to talk about the intervening criminal conduct. And I don't want to bore you guys to death because this Smith and Wesson already made a bunch of arguments here. But they point out, as petitioner's own case explains, the superseding cause doctrine applies only where the injury is actually brought about by a later cause of independent origin that was not foreseeable. So they're pointing out that Mexico alleges the petitioners actually intended their guns would end up in the hands of the cartels. Once again, this is nonsense. If I wanted to make money getting guns to the cartels, there are far more effective ways to make sure guns get to the cartels. Yes, and how's that one store and 50 gun permits working out for them? Yeah, well, that's a separate issue there. But this, once again, is just an example of how shit their thinking is. They talk about the derivative injuries. The harm caused by the trafficking goes in multiple directions, both directly to the victims and directly to the Mexican government. And they say because Mexico had increased spending on combating the cartels, Mexico has suffered direct injury to its military and federal police, as well as government equipment. And then finally, there's the idea of apportionment. We talked about this. How do you portion out the liability? Well, the Court of Appeals made the argument that the apportionment concerns do not apply to Mexico's requested injunctive relief. And that's true. They want Smith and Wesson to stop doing something. And by them stopping it, it would stop everything else, they argue. And they also say that damages are only difficult to apportion when there's a disconnect between the conduct and the injury, but they're arguing here it's all one thing. So for them, there is, they say once the causal chain is properly linked, there's no discontinuity between the gun company's conduct and Mexico's injuries, which bullshit. So, so they're arguing, let us handle it, but we know this lost. We ultimately know this lost. And what's going to happen here? Well, and remember, it's just these 4 groups arguing, and that's it. So, guys, in the meantime, what did the Supreme Court do? Well, we get down to what happened here. And the Supreme Court went down and said, well, sorry, I went too far. On October 4th, the petition was granted. So we're a little behind on this, but it is important to know the petition got granted. So it's going to the Supreme Court, at least 4 justices. Remember, when it comes to the Supreme Court, you only need a minimum of 4 justices that want to hear your case. If 4 of them agree to hear it, you get listed. Now, more of them may want to hear this, and I'm assuming a bunch of them wanted to hear this. So it's not just them. And we will find out what happens. But I think this is going to be a very, very good ruling on behalf of the gun companies. So I think it'll be fine there. Allegan News said, did Mexico submit to discovery? No. Remember, this was all summary judgment and motion to dismiss stage. We never got that far. So there has been no discovery yet. This is all at the first stage. So we haven't even got to discovery. That's part of what Mexico's argument is. Judge, this is too early. We need to get through discovery, and then we can have really summary judgment motions. Right now, it's way too early to argue. It's not fair to anybody. We don't have any facts at all. You're just literally looking at these 2 documents, our complaint, their motion to dismiss, and that's not fair to anybody. So no, we have not gotten that far. And and you notice in that we went to that, and I didn't find it in Mexico's brief and response. They never admitted, yeah, most of these aren't theirs, because if they did, that would really kill their claims anyway. But Smith & Wesson knows because they've gone through the federal government's documentation. That stuff has been out there and is available. It's all FOIA. And with that, you can determine, like, yes, most of these guns are not coming from American gun manufacturers. So, yes, it's going to SCOTUS. We'll find out what happened. Maddie says, so 4 DEI judges. Well, no, it could have been like Alito, Clarence Thomas, and like Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett being like, this is fucking wrong. We got to stop this. Who really knows who voted for it? The vote's not known. But it could be both ways on this. AD saying, is that a rightness question? Not really. It's an issue of rightness because it's a final appealable order. A motion to dismiss is a final appealable order. So it's ripe. But it's they're kind of arguing rightness, but it's not rightness in the true sense of the issue hasn't been at a stage where it can be decided yet. We're at that point. So you can kind of argue it's a rightness issue, but they don't use rightness in their I will argue. I'll check here. Yeah, they don't use the word rightness in their cert petition, the cert opposition motion. So it's not really rightness. I don't think would be the right way you'd want to argue that. You'd just be like, Your Honor, it's too early. We have no facts. And as I highlighted, we don't have a factual record yet, Judge. That's not fair. So, Maddie says, I mean, the Supreme Court is 4 DEI judges on the court. Well, yeah, sure. Sure. Barrett is a shill. Yes, but you know what? They're all shills. When you're a company doing governmental sales, you're a shill at that point. I mean, that's what happens. AD saying rightness is one of the Brandeis constitutional avoidance questions. It is, but you do you're not. There's no issue of rightness being argued. Now, could the court sua sponte argue it's right unripe? Sure, but they're not going to. This is a pretty important issue that's going to have massive implications for tort law across the United States. So no, this is pretty ripe. It's ripe to deal with it. It's ripe. There's no problems with it. So I don't think ripeness would be an effective argument here. Is it normal for another country to sue a private company in America? At times it happens. I mean, it's not impossible. But like this, no. Not like this. You're saying ripe sounds like a weird thing. Is it funny and weird or just weird? Oh. So, take KV, you're saying, what's rightness? Well, rightness is more of like issues like the plaintiff hasn't suffered a harm or the things they're talking about haven't occurred yet. So, for example, like remember in 2020 with a lot of the election lawsuits being brought. Well, you're raising issues before the election happens. Oh, it's not ripe yet. It hasn't happened. We don't know what's going to happen. Sorry, you can't. You're precluded. That's really more of what the rightness issues come out of. So that's more of a ripe issue. That's a ripeness issue. I mean, the argument of we're not ready, the case hasn't been decided. Well, yeah, that's more of just an idea of the record hasn't really. We don't have a full record, but it's not like the record was denied. It's just the court made its record saying, "I think this is bullshit." Dismissed. That's enough of a record to move forward. Once again, it's a final appealable order. We used to have proper justices like Chief Justice Taney. Yeah, Taney. Oh my God. Yeah, I hope that explains things, 10K. Ripe sounds rapey. Oof. Yes, this has the gun control community's fingerprints all over it. It's literally the same playbook. Did I know Sam Hyde is in Cleveland on Wednesday? No, I did not. I wish I would have known. That'd have been awesome to go to. So anyways, we got some comments here and things to get through. Drew K. Been a member for 2 months. Thank you for the support. He's saying, "Suh, dude. What's up?" Then Skeeve Man for £5 sterling says, "I'll give you 3 minutes." No. I give you 2 minutes. And then I come in with the Baldo and the butter. You know how to threaten somebody, I will say. That motivates people. Drew K says, do you think George, and this is relating to Sarah Boone, was thrown down the stairs before or after being put in the suitcase? I thought after till you pointed out the blood on the stairs. Well, I will point, I think that's blood on the stairs. I don't know if that's blood. That could be just like dirtiness in their house. Like, I don't think it's dirtiness because you don't just get dirt on the edge of the treads like that on stairs. I'm pretty sure that's blood on the stairs. But I don't know. Because it also means for that much blood to be on the stairs, he would have had to have sat there long enough to bleed out in a way. I don't know. I don't know. It's not clear. Monreza says my Dragon Ball Z shit talking would not be tolerated in Mexico. Well, I don't care. Dragon Ball Z sucks. Examoon says, why not sue Obama for Fast and Furious operations? He's got immunity. There's an official act. Ammo's Currency saying Trump should MacArthur the U.S.-Mexico border just for this lawsuit. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. That's not a bad idea. Oh. Anderson Cooper 360 Noscope says, when they send their trolls to Sean's chat, they aren't sending their best. I didn't even realize who you're talking about. Yes, we should countersue for fentanyl. I agree, Alyssa. And Scylla is saying it's why Backyard Ballistics is the channel. Because of the cartels? Huh. I don't think that's what you're referring to, but I'm not sure. AD for $10 says, have you ever heard of the public health such public nuisance theory of firearms? Many law reviews opine about suing gun companies under a public health theory. Yes, there are theories for that. I don't think those are going to get, the idea that it's a public nuisance and because of the way that it's harming the public. Yeah, I don't think that's really what we want to allow, because there's a lot of public nuisance theory there. Because the idea is by selling more guns, you're creating more and more misuse, but we sell more and more, pharmaceuticals. We sell more and more cars. We sell more and more everything. Like it's, but you end up with a lot of the same issues though, of like knowing the guns would be used illegally and you're engaging in unreasonable strategies of like selling them. And that's not present here. So yeah, I know people have tried it, but I still think that's wrong. Because I forget which case it is where they were trying to say, it was Daniel Defense in one of their lawsuits. It's like, your man card just got upgraded. Buy the DD M4 V4. And it's like, buy their version of the M4, their Mark 18 clone. And it's like, yeah. So I've heard of it. It's bullshit. Did I go to Nick's barber? No, because my haircut doesn't look like a angry lesbian. I go to a good hairdresser. The lady who does my hair does a great job. Does a great job. Yes, Rico is right. Boogie2988 drinking Mountain Dew. Does that make Pepsi Cola liable for all of Boogie2988's criminal acts? Yes. Pepsi is liable for Boogie shooting guns off at schools and for Boogie faking cancer. And for every other thing Boogie does, he's liable. They're liable. Jefferson Post is a new member. Thank you, Jefferson. Thank you for re-upping. I appreciate the support. 10KV says, I made a Johnny Depp reference. Yes, I did. Alligator News says, failed Fast and Furious is the roadmap. Yes, it is. It is 100% the roadmap for this. And Alligator News says, or are they marketing to Mexican Americans who can buy them? I mean, I think it's more of just a liberty-based saying, like, in marketing to the, the freedom-minded in the gun market. It's not like you're going to fucking put, like, think about it. You're making 1911s. You're not going to engrave Rachel Carson quotes from Silent Spring on the side of it. You're going to do, like, freedom and standing up to the government and living on your feet. You're not going to, not going to put fucking J.D. Salinger on the side of it. Oh, but yes, I agree. Or, or are they marketing to Mexican Americans who can buy them? And yes, it's the state of Mexico saying, it's impossible to tell between Mexican Americans and cartel members. Well, oh boy, even Trump hasn't gone that far. And yes, so if we market to Mexican Americans, are we now advertising to the cartel? I know. That's the argument they're making. It's like, I don't know if you guys want to make that argument. Like, that'll be a bit of an issue. But yes, thank you for all the super chats, man. That was a lot right there. Thank you. Garrett says Nick is stressed out. Oh, I'm not. No, we're not doing that. No, that's not funny. They're gonna put 2 world wars on the slide. Yes. The name of some sort is I get a nickel-plated Mexican flag, 1911 and 38 Super, to carry around in my waist to call people homes. Yes. Yeah, give me a El Los Cote. How do you say 1911 in Spanish? What would how do you say? Oh, hold on. In Spanglish. 1911. 1911. Like, well, there we go. You give me one of those El Colt El Manufacturing with the Mexican flag on it, I'll tuck that in my waistband too, and just walk up to everybody and call them SA. I'm fine with that. Can gun companies be sued in state courts? Well, they're supposed to be precluded because of the PLCAA. That's a federal preemption, meaning the federal government has completely exempted that field from lawsuit. Now, here's the thing, AD. Like I said, if I'm shooting a Glock and it explodes because they did something wrong, yes, I can still sue them. TNN not 38 Super? I don't. You don't sell 1911 in Spanish. It's strictly American. Well, what would they call it? T-Money? $1911 easy. Oh, yes, Allegan, you've got a very good point here. You could put the bald eagle on one side of the slide and the Mexican eagle on the other. They're both eagles. It's just one of them's eating a snake. Who are they advertising to? The cartel or Mexican Americans? I agree. Also carrying 38 is gay as AIDS. 38 Super is actually pretty. I've shot some 1911s and 38 Super. They're a lot of fun. They're pretty neat. It's a very interesting cartridge for a different time. And 38 Super came out. It was addressing a special issue. So I don't think it's wrong to deal with it. I mean, it gives you a, it came out at a time where like 38s were like, we needed more you need more firepower. Like police were looking for things on how to upgrade from their 38s because they weren't getting the job done and there weren't like more powerful pistols available. So you could get a semi-automatic handgun in 38 Super. Why not? Yeah. What do you guys... I bought a Spanish-made 1911 and 1962. It's pretty solid. Yes, guns made in Spain are very good. I have a Star BM in my safe. It's like the 9mm Commanders. Those are pretty cool. Yes, the Baldello Eagle. Yes. Yes, Google Chalano Sanchez 1911 Pistola. Yeah, well, let me see here. Let me see. All right. I can't show it, but I can look at it. Okay. Oh, wow. Those are some pretty hot gun grips. El Jefe de Jefes, the Chief of Chiefs, the Sinaloa cartel. Oh. He was a narco singer. He shot and killed a man at 15. Oof. This guy has a pretty Chalino Sanchez. Wow. Pretty tough hombre. Pretty tough hombre. Never heard of him, but that's pretty dope. Odin Reactor says, how about the 10mm round? Well, the 10mm round didn't exist until the 80s. And then into the 80s. So, I mean, 38 Super was around for a long time. 10mm is a military caliber. M&P MP5s are chambered in 10mm. So that would be considered a military caliber. And the Mexican government probably does have MP5s chambered in 10 millimeter. So you wouldn't be allowed to have that. Karate Cat Mom says, fun fact, Mexican eagles are actually falcons. They don't even have real eagles. They don't even have real eagles in Mexico. It's like the eagle we have at home. Oh. I'm zooming at Shot's glasses right now. Yeah. Yes, Narco Corridos. Yeah. His nickname was Dirty. I know. I have his thing up. This is interesting. This is interesting. Yeah, called El Rey del Corrido. Yes. El Corrido. Yeah, a chalino means a scarf worn around your neck. His death was brutal. I'm reading about it right now. Like, he worked as a. Oh my god, this guy. Oh god, this is kind of like a mad lad in and of himself. We're gonna read about this guy real quick, chat. We're gonna read this guy. This is impressive. Okay, so look at this dude. I mean that's okay. That's big dick energy right there. He ain't afraid to fuck. He ain't afraid to fuck around. Look at him. All right. One of the most influential Mexican narco corrido singers of the late 20th century. Okay. He also sang radio-friendly songs. At the age of 15, he shot and killed a man who raped his sister. Okay. His brother was murdered in a Tijuana hotel. While serving time in prison, he composed songs for inmates for stories they wanted to preserve. Okay, so let's see here. At 15, he shot and killed a man who raped his sister. He then moved to Tijuana, where he worked as a coyote, smuggling people in the U.S. Oh, so then he then fled the United States to avoid the Mexican government. Oh. He also helped his brother run an immigrant smuggling operation. Holy shit. Holy shit. Wow. This guy is like, he's not exactly the nicest guy in the world. Okay. So, yeah, he ended up getting involved in this shit. Okay, so he was at Coachella at a nightclub and he got shot. They fired 4 shots at him in retaliation. Sanchez fired his gun. It jammed and Sanchez threw the gun. Sanchez got hit twice in the chest near his armpit, striking his lung. 1 bullet hit the accordionist in the thigh. And Sanchez's shots missed his attacker and accidentally hit and killed a 20-year-old bystander. Oh, no. 9 to 15 shots were fired and 10 people were hit. Well, this is interesting. This is interesting. Oh, no. Oh. They gave him a note saying he was going to get murdered that night. He tried to escape, but they got him. Oh. Well, we're going to get to the murder. Okay, so the gunman was convicted of attempted murder, sentenced to 20 years. He was paroled in 2023. Well, hold on here. 20 to life, and he did almost 30 years. Yeah, well, that's fair. Okay, so in 92 he got murdered. He began fearing for his life. Well, no shit. So during a performance in Culiacan, he was handed a note from the crowd. It's common to believe a death threat warning he'd be killed, but it was never confirmed. After reading the note, he crumpled it up and kept singing. After midnight, he left the club, and they were pulled over by a group of men in black Suburbans. They showed state police ID cards and told Chalino their commander wanted to see him. He got one of their cars. Well, that's a bad idea. Following morning, they found him in an irrigation canal. He was blindfolded and his wrist had marks, and he got shot in the head twice. Woof. Well, there you go. He's buried at Sinaloa. You know, just a good old boy. Just a good old boy from Sinaloa, chat. Just a good old boy. Never meaning no harm. Just smuggling everybody you ever saw. But he's been in trouble with the law since the day he was born. Yeah. Yeah, so all his future royalties for a crappy house. Yeah. Piss off the wrong dirty cop. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure, but I love the idea. He's like, oh, okay, let's go. There's footage of him on stage being handed the note. Really? Okay, well, we'll look at this real quick. Then we'll probably wrap this up, chat, because it is getting late. Let's see here. All right, let's see here. Oh, wow, you typed that in immediately. It says handed note. Oh, okay. Yeah, here we go. Sharing this tab. Here we go. Hold on. The video is a nothing burger. Yeah, well, let's see. Well, there we go. So that was, I thought it'd be a little more theatrical than it was. Yeah, he coked the fuck up. Yeah. Yeah, you see the oh shit look on his face where it goes back to singing. Yeah, a little bit. So, all right, chat. Well, we're going to land the plane now. We're landing it. Thank you for all being here. I just thought it was important we go through this, see where the cert petition was going to go. So, yes, guys, it's not just a Second Amendment issue that's a big thing here. There is a lot riding on, tort law in general. So it's not just federal cases that are going to do tort law. It's going to do, state questions are going to hinge upon this also. So he's actually a pretty good singer. I'll have to listen to him. Yeah, oh boy, that nervous brow wipe. Yeah, that was something. That was the one thing I did notice. So, all right, guys, that is it. Thank you for everybody being here. The 5 of you on Twitch. Wow, 5 people on Twitch. I'm getting big. Like next stop is big as Kershaw. She better watch out. I'm coming. I'm gonna eclipse her pretty quick. No proof of Clyde life. I'm not sure if he's gonna come out or if he's sleeping already. Hold on, Clyde. Come here, buddy. Hi, Clyde. Come on. Come here. Come on. Come here, Clyde. Where are you going? Oh, you don't want to come in here? What's wrong? I don't know what his deal is, guide. Oh. So, see, I'm wrecking the ethno-nationals hairdo tonight. I am not wrecking anything different than normal, guys. I don't wear a drop fade. A drop fade does not look good on me, okay? And this is not a drop fade, I promise. If I was going to wear a haircut like I'm invading Poland, you'll know. Because then our opening song would be Erica. What are my thoughts on the Cleveland Indians? It's another year they're going to fuck up, guys. Come on. Like, I don't know what happens. Am I streaming Sarah tomorrow? Yes, but it won't be till after I get done with court, and that's probably not going to be till probably like 4 o'clock. So probably about 4 or 5 I'll be around to start it, but it won't be for a while. So, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Like I said, just keep your eyes peeled. And then, in the meantime, remember, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. And that includes gun manufacturers. Yes, they sold guns, but it's not their fault the cartels are using them. So, good night, everybody, and take care. Weapons blacksmithing
and models of planes, esoteric works, and even some trains. Much merriment had while drinking White Claws, tips on hunting, and even talking the law. Whatever you do, just don't talk to cops, even when they nab you on illegal stops. Just 'cause you did it doesn't mean you're guilty, but please talk to a local attorney. Was that the fat guy Rick hated yelled at? Why, yes it was, he even knows he's fat. For all this fun and more, there's one place to go.
No, Max is not better than Lando. Lando is a far more promising driver. He's got far more heights for him to soar to. No, he is not better. Max is not better than Lando.
Here on Sean Martin's Petition.